I remember with Kennedy too. He tried to keep his Catholicism somewhat on the private side as well. And I'm just wondering if that is kind of carrying over. Or do you think we're all done with any kind of religious prejudice?
No, I think the religious prejudice is there. This was long ago, but I remember when I interviewed for my first job out of law school, and I went through 3 or 4 different interviews at a large firm in Los Angeles. And L.A., you would think, is a pretty open-minded liberal place. And the final interview, they sat me down and they said, you're qualified, this is all very good, but you don't drink. And we go out with our clients and drink a lot, and that's how we connect. And so you're just not going to fit in here. So it still happens. It happens, quite often in subtle ways, and I'm sure that other minorities feel the same kinds of things in different ways, but it happens. I think, though, that people are slowly turning around to the notion that the religious part is not as important as the guy's character and his family situation, and is he going to be stable, and is he going to do things in a carefully moderated way. And I think that if you look at his religion, at least his religious background would push him in that direction.
Well, I read one article, too, that the LDS people were hired by the mafia at one point to run the casinos in Vegas because they were honest people. And
I actually have an in-law who was on the state gaming commission in Nevada, very active Mormon, and when they interviewed him, that's exactly what they said. They said, well, we know your hand's not in the till, so we can trust you, and that's exactly where we want you. And so that's pretty funny you bring that up, because I actually have personal experience, not with the mafia, but with the State Gaming Commission in Nevada.
The gangsters seem to think that way.
I think a lot of people do. Howard Hughes had, as some of his most closely associated employees, a lot of Mormons. There were a lot of Mormons in his inner circle because he trusted them.
For people who have not been to Salt Lake City, it's an interesting place, first of all, and not only from a tourist attraction, but we spent a lot of time in the genealogy center you have there, and it was fascinating. In fact, we were able to trace our family history that goes way back, and my daughter even made a special trip to Salt Lake just to do research there.
The Mormon Church has become, maybe proud is too strong a word, but extremely excited about the genealogy progress that they've made. We do that genealogy because we believe in our ancestors and the things they've done for us. And so it's become a huge valuable asset to Mormons and non-Mormons, and it's opened up to non-Mormons. So non-Mormons can go in there just like Mormons and review their histories and trace back sometimes hundreds of years. And it's actually quite fun. I found out that my great-great-grandmother was one of the women who walked across the plains when the Mormons were forced out of the United States and did their migration west to Utah. And that was through the genealogy department at the church.
Well, the Mormons, of course, were persecuted in the early days, too, because of polygamy, for one thing.
Right, and there were some political things that came up. In fact, it's a really interesting history. In Missouri, I'll give you one little example. In Daviess County, which is a little bit, I believe, east of Kansas City, when the Mormons started to move into Missouri, they became 30% of the population of Daviess County within a couple of years. And so the population that was there originally becomes understandably concerned, because now you have a voting bloc of 30% who looks like they'll vote for the same person, and you lose your power in your own community. That was going on all over the place, and wherever the Mormons congregated, that was an issue that the locals had a very hard time with, and it's somewhat understandable. So politically, they did suffer a lot of persecution. First they started out way back east in New York, and then they moved into Pennsylvania and Ohio, and then Missouri, and then finally Illinois, where they started a city called Nauvoo. It became the second largest city in Illinois, and then Joseph Smith was murdered, and then that's when the church went west. Well,
you spent some time in Thailand, too, and in your days as a missionary, try to convert some of the Buddhists. How did that go?
Here was an interesting thing about the Buddhists. They were wonderful people to be around, and the Thai people are just extraordinarily friendly and kind, which makes it a great place to vacation. But one of the things that came about was they had a phrase, a very famous phrase to Thais, and it was Tuk sasana son hai kon ben kondi, which translated means all religions teach you to be good. So they were very friendly, and they would always invite me in, and we could talk, and we would talk religion. And when I was a young missionary, I loved that phrase because it meant to me that I was going to be invited in. The problem was, once you got invited in, and you were eating and you're just enjoying life, but the problem for me as a missionary was, well, they already felt like all religions teach you to be good, so there was no need for them to change. And so it was very difficult to convert them. From my days where I worked in cities where there were no members of the church, there are now entire congregations, and the church is growing in Thailand, just like in many parts of the world. It's an interesting misnomer about the Mormons being just an American church. It is how we started, but now we have about 14-plus million members, and more than half of those live outside of the United States, and more than half speak a language other than English as their first language. So it's become quite an international church, although it's still fairly small compared to some of the other Christian churches.
Well, entertainment seems to be one of your fortes, too. I've had a chance to visit the Mormon Center for Entertainment Purposes in Hawaii.
Yes.
The Tabernacle Choir. And, in fact, I belong to the Radio and Television News Directors Association, and one of our members was Spencer Kennard, who...
Yes.
And Spence was the director of it at one time, and we had a convention in Salt Lake City, and he arranged for the full choir of the Mormons and everything to entertain us. So that was great. It was at the temple.
It's an interesting thing, this entertainment factor you bring up, because I get asked all the time, and this shows how little people know about the Mormons. I get asked all the time, well, can you guys dance? Can you sing? Can you do those kinds of things? And wow, we have whole big organizations that do nothing but that. So yes, we can do all of those things. We actually, on occasion, have fun. So it's an interesting thing because you're right. We get involved in all kinds of different paths of life, but because we've been such a small church for so long, it was only 25, 30 years ago, we only had 3 or 4 million members. So we've been growing rather rapidly.
Well, I watch your TV station quite frequently for sporting events, and
yes.
I don't find it anywhere else.
BYU is a fairly limited market, and so they have their own television station for sports and other activities. And so, I think a good number of Mormons subscribe to that station so they can watch their football team, which is good some years and not so good other years, and the other athletic teams that they have. They try to be, Mormons are really not that much different than anyone else. They're very family-oriented. They like to work hard. They like to help other people. And I think that's really something that smacks of just American values, and I think that's reflected by our church now, and by the fact that we were rooted here in America. So a lot of the American values are what we adhere to.
Well, so we're running out of time for this segment of the program. Any final comments you'd like to make?
I think the only thing I would say is that the Mormons are a Christian religion by almost any standard. You can read about them in my book that I explain a lot of our doctrines and a lot of the practices of the missionaries, and it's actually a fun read. It's a quick read. You can get it at Amazon.com, on Kindle, so it's ebook format at Nook and iBooks, and at MormonArmy.net.